I think for us as event marketers, sometimes unfortunately we track overall show success just by the number of leads. And I learned quickly on that a lead is just an expensive conversation until it turns into an opportunity.
Welcome to Event Marketing Redefined. I'm your host, Matt Kleinrock, CEO of Rockaway Exhibits and Events. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for taking time. Thanks for meeting us for an hour. Thanks for being a part of this community to come and talk all things events and trade shows, as we love to do. Justin Keys is here. And Justin, I like your name, Justin Keys. I like to say it all in one go, you know? Anyway, everybody, Justin is the senior manager brand marketing at Georgia Pacific. We have a fun conversation lined up for you today. And I think it's cool because we do on this show talk a lot about the creative, kind of like the over the top things, the experiential things in events. But as we all know, the underlayer of that, strategy, execution, kind of doing things the right way to produce the results that we need is a very big piece of running an event program. So Justin is here to talk about that today. Justin, welcome. Thanks for doing this, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. Excited for the conversation as well.
And Cody just said, yes, Cody. She said, it's like a celebrity name, like Justin Keys, like you would say it together. A lot. No, I'm serious. I don't know why. It just kind of rolls off the tongue. All right. Let's do this. So, Justin, where I want to start. I think for an event marketer, it's always good to kind of start here. When did it kind of hit you that essentially like planning everything wasn't enough and that you had to kind of get into this more of like strategic execution mode with these outcomes and doing things the right way that you were seeking? When did that hit you? Was there an aha moment? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I'd say starting off, almost 12 years ago, it was super focused on like, hey, I'm the logistics guy, right? Like I get the event details, I take it from maybe where we've started from a strategy perspective to execution. And so I think, I'd say within the first 5 years, that's really what it was for me. And then I'd say probably maybe a little bit before COVID, I started to think like, hey, this actually should be beyond just, hey, Justin, go take care of the trade show. It's like, hey, how do I become a part of that initial conversation? So you fast forward a bit into kind of like my journey into Georgia Pacific a couple years back, and I noticed that there was a bit of a disparity in regards to, trade shows and the execution piece and kind of the vision for sales and leadership into kind of making that trade show what it was. So I'd say that was really the pivotal moment in realizing like, hey, we should probably have a seat at the table, even beyond, hey, Justin, we want to go to this trade show, or hey, Justin, we think a brand activation would be needed at this conference. And, and taking a step back and saying like from a strategy perspective, what does our overall annual strategy look like? And then how do those channels kind of plug into that strategy? And so once I began to really get logistics out of my mind and start to own the P&L piece, right? We're not just managing a budget, we're also managing the P&L and how that affects the bottom line, but then also thinking about, in regards to those ROI conversations. And so I think that was like a turning moment to understand like, hey, I should probably shift my thinking a bit to instead of being just, hey, let's knock out the logistics, let's start to have a seat at the table and have those conversations from the very beginning.
I think there's a few really great terms that you kind of put in there and things that you laid out. One is this concept of we're not just managing a budget, right? Mm-hmm. And I think where some people sometimes get lost in doing on the event side of things is like, yes, like you have to manage a budget. You have to be a steward of budget, right? But that's kind of the given to me. The same way like you were talking with logistics, the logistics is the given, right? Yep. I think event people, both event managers for corporate companies, event agencies, event partners, exhibit houses, everybody in the industry has to stop hanging our hat on this logistical piece because it's what we're supposed to do. And it's what we're supposed to do really well. But what I love where you took that was you were talking about viewing it more as like a P&L aspect of what are we trying to accomplish here, right? We got costs, we got returns coming in. And as you mentioned, ROI, viewing it more that way as like a business equation. I really, really like that you kind of laid that out. Was there any struggles you had when you started pushing and trying to have that discussion at your company or ask more questions along those lines?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think the initial thought was like, hey, where does this fit into the conversation? Yeah, I know we go to X trade show every year, but how does that fit into the overall strategy? And so I think that even took the discussion a bit higher level and to start thinking again about this overall strategy for the year. I'm sure like many organizations, you're planning your annual strategy overall, and then that helps influence a lot of the channels that you're turning on. And so kind of repositioning the conversation to say, hey, I'm going to XYZ trade show. And instead of saying that, it's like, hey, maybe what product are we introducing this year? What service are we rolling out? How are we pushing our messaging or brand awareness for? And then within that overarching kind of strategy, oh, I think this trade show would be a great addition to kind of further that message, right? And so once we started to have the conversations a lot broader in that respect, then it's kind of like, oh, yeah, no, definitely makes sense for Justin to be a part of this meeting, but I can definitely attest to some of those earlier conversations where it's kind of a head scratcher. It's like, hey, what's the trade show guy doing here, right? Like, how does he play
Yeah.
into this conversation? And so I think a bit of it is overall education, right? And I don't think that's anyone's fault per se, but educating them how this is a larger picture. But then also, I think being able to answer some of the questions, right? Like to your point, Matt, you said, hey, like we all love the creative stuff. We love to see it in a
Yeah.
rendering and come to life. But beyond that, how are we driving volume, dollars, and margin, if you will, for the sales team? And I think that's the main ticker right there.
Just make me thinking about you saying that was last week I was asked to give a talk to an MPI group. They have like an exhibit portion of their group. And one of the things I started talking about was how does your trade show program fit into the go-to-market strategy for the company? Like,
Yeah.
how does it fit? Because what I love about that question is, yeah, it's like a 30,000 foot view question, but if you bring it down a little bit, it really does get you thinking like, where do we fall in the sales cycle? Right?
Mhm.
From awareness to contract signed to customers vertically cross selling. So, I mean, it
Yeah.
covers all of it. Where do you fit in there? And where does each show fit into those things? Because it is what events are for, face to
Right.
face, the interaction, but it's like, what are you trying to accomplish? And in which part of your sales cycle, where do you fall? And trade shows events should have a seat at that table. One thing
Absolutely.
that you touched on, I want to talk about is annual strategy. This is kind of annual strategy time,
Yeah.
right? To a little bit of
Yeah.
degree, people getting ready for next year. I know sometimes there's a lot of Q1 stuff that's going on that get planned for way in advance, right? Because we're running year round. What's a little bit of your take on like annual strategy? You obviously have a lot of events, a lot of trade shows, a lot of things to plan for. How do
Mhm.
you kind of go about annual strategic planning?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we take annual planning in doses. So I think for some, it could be really overwhelming or overstimulating to say, hey, November, I'm going to go heads down and plan for 2026. So for us, we kind of have mid-year check-ins. We have some quarterly check-ins as we're assessing our different channel campaigns and the results and kind of the strength of them. But I think overall, we take it in bite-sized pieces. We've learned, I think my team in particular is, hey, while right now we are absolutely looking ahead for the full scope of 2026, we're also taking those in bite-sized chunks. Now, that does not mean, hey, let's wait until January to talk about a March show, but that also means that it's okay to take some time to sit into some of this stuff. I'm sure we can all relate to like sitting in these planning meetings at the end of the year and you walk away with the list, the size of Montana, and then you're like, all right, how am I going to get all this stuff done? And so I think with us kind of breaking it down into bite-sized pieces, we're able to better equip ourselves. Speaking specifically around trade shows, we kind of break it down by industry. And so by industry, we're also obviously prioritizing from a sales perspective, but then we can kind of lay it out and kind of see like what industry shows are following during which periods and maybe where we need to dial up our bandwidth to support those shows and then maybe where we can kind of lessen them. We break ours into a three-tier model. So tier one is typically like our larger shows, our pinnacle shows that we know we're going to. Matt, you and I were talking about the day after the show ends for that
Yeah.
previous year. Like we know, yep, we got to go get the spot for next year. And so obviously those take a little bit more time to plan, but I think, one thing that I always tell my team is like, trade show isn't the strategy. Like if your trade show is your strategy, you're essentially not doing it right, right? And so I think that if we take that mindset out of it and holistically focus on what this North Star document says, what our strategy says, and then being able to, like I said, turn on those channels, we just work better. So as I was mentioning to you, we have a kind of Q4 roundup session planned. It's a 3-day session where we are basically, as teams, kind of reporting out on the successes and the wins of the year, but then also the opportunities. But in that, we also kind of lock down, I'd say 80% of our trade shows for the following year. One thing that you said that I think is probably reigns true across the board here is that you will have, a salesperson pop up 2 months for a show. Justin, we really have to be at this show and we need a 60 by 80. And
Yeah.
I think you said, hey, we need Beyonce to show up and do a concert, right? And so I
Need a
think
Beyonce show.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. But I think in those moments, because you've prepared so well for the year, you're able
Yeah.
to take on that additional workload because you've kind of already set yourself up for success for the entire year. So I know that was a long-winded answer, but I think
No, it's
strategy
good.
and annual planning, it sounds so mundane, but I think it just, sets you apart from programs that maybe aren't as organized.
Let's talk about the business case of events,
Mhm.
right? I think that's a big one. I think that's something that every event marketer in big companies or small companies struggles with, which is getting alignment with sales and marketing and executives, discussing and outlining audience, ICP, what are the
Mhm.
outcomes we want, right? Like really trying to get everybody in tune.
Yep.
How have you built business cases? Who are you bringing them to? What do those conversations look like? What are those discussions? When are they happening? Just give us kind of a rundown of all that.
Yeah, I mean that's so very fair question, and I take it into two buckets. My first bucket is really focused around sales shows, so shows that maybe I've talked with the salesperson or someone from our team has been contacted, excuse me, by sales to say, hey guys, we really need to be at this show, and here's why. Right. And so we begin to think about that. And it depends on who it's coming from and in regards to how we take that. But then I think the other bucket is marketing recommended shows. Right. So we know at the forefront when we're planning strategy and when we're trying to dip into different verticals and industries, we know like, hey, this show is really going to move the needle and here's why. Right. And so in thinking about those two buckets, then we begin to drill down on how we build the business case. If someone from sales leadership says, hey, we need to be at this show, we'll be at that show, right? But we'll also kind of help them understand maybe how we go to market with that show or how that integrates into our overall strategy. And so I think that when you think about building business cases for us, a lot of times too, we're building kind of champion circles, right? Like let's say you, Cody, and Ish are all on one team, and maybe you're really going after, I just call it the poultry market. Like you are helping us build our business case because essentially you're the SMEs in the market. You know who's going to be there, you know how to kind of pull different topics in, whether we're going to try to do a thought leadership speaking opportunity. Like there's so many aspects that go into
Yeah.
it. And so from there, once we have that sales buy-in on that side of it, we're able to build that case out. Think about historically, have we been to the show before? Do we know any other businesses within our segment or within our portfolio of companies? Has anyone been to the show before? And so I think that the more you come to articulate the overall high level information, I think the better it is on the sales side. Now, from the marketing side, it's a little bit more difficult, right? Because maybe
Mhm.
no one's heard of the show. Maybe they're not as confident in us being able to get some type of a return out of the show. But I think the interesting piece of that is really, again, layering it back to the strategy to say, like, hey, I know poultry is one of our highest kind of opportunities here. And here's some poultry shows in the past. Here's what we've seen. Here's some data, or some research that we've gathered. And here's why we think we should be there. I definitely think you seem to think that trade shows sometimes get a bad rap, hey, it's a vacation or hey, you're just going to travel. But I think if you can continue to drive home why we need to be there, what value the trade show is adding, and how we're able to kind of pull some return out of that, I think it'll kind of continue to work itself out. I try not to go into these conversations with a 20-page business case because likely leadership's not going to read that, right? And so really kind
Yeah.
of pulling out the major critical pieces and being able to share that, I think has worked really well for us.
Talk to me a little bit about that champion circles. Like, I mean, I think that's a really good term,
Yeah.
especially for the way you were kind of describing it. Like, just give us some more detail on that about kind of how, like, what that looks like for you.
Yeah. So our champion circles are really our kind of think about a focus group, but a focus group on steroids, right? And the
Yeah.
focus group already has some sort of stake within what you're doing. And a lot of times we are leaning on them because, what we've seen is you put a bunch of sales folks in a room, they may or may not be as vocal as they are maybe in a smaller subset, right? And so being able to identify that subset and say, hey, Matt, Cody, and Ish, I know you guys are all super hyper focused on these types of accounts or this vertical. How can we help you help us to then build this business case to say we need to be at the show and here's why? And I also think that brings in a level of accountability. Like if you feel like you have some skin in the game and you feel like you need
Yeah.
to prove yourself, then you're also going to encourage your teammates that maybe I don't have direct kind of correlation to say like, hey guys, like we're really going out on a limb here to see if the show could be successful. Like we need everyone to be locked in and dialed in. And so we meet with several of our champions of circles probably once a quarter, call it. And a lot of times we're analyzing maybe 2 quarters ahead to make sure like, hey, we got the show on the roster. How are we feeling? Right. And that's in addition to our core planning committee. We have show owners for each of our shows. And so let's say, again, you're in charge of some vertical. I'm going to engage you with your core planning committee, but that champion of circle committee is also going to kind of help come in and influence. And I think influence probably is the biggest piece of that. And that's
Yeah.
really what's helped our marketing team really be really one connected with the sales team, but also be really dialed in to understand like their needs and why they're going to these shows or what they're looking to get out of it.
I like that phrase, and I like kind of the idea behind it. That, it's good you broke that down for everybody. I think what's great about it is you're getting real buy-in by asking people's opinion, by trying to get
Exactly.
them involved in the process. You're now saying, okay, like we've kind of agreed to go execute this now. So
Absolutely.
now, are we all on board for going to execute this in the way that we want to execute it? Let's take a question. We got a question. If you have a question, throw it in the chat, throw it in bottom of your screen. There's a Q&A box. You can do that as well. But Michelle put a question in the chat. Hi, Michelle. I hope you're doing great. Past guest of the show. Michelle said, how are you researching potential new shows to attend? Do you have a process?
Great question. Yeah. So as a part of our annual planning, we spend about 4 to 5 hours throughout that 3 day period, really hyper focused on maybe any new emerging shows that have popped up in any of the industry. Well, let me take a step back. I think the biggest thing, Michelle, is understanding what industries or verticals you're going after. That will help kind of quicken this research that you're doing. So that way you know exactly what shows and you're not getting a bunch of trash or things maybe that aren't particularly of interest to you. So once you've identified those verticals or industries that you know that your team or your sales folks are focused on, then you can begin to drill down and understand maybe what those shows are. For us, we're able to span into a couple different countries. And so we're also looking by country, like, hey, do we want to plug in here? Would we like to plug in there? But I think for us, over those 4 or 5 hours throughout that 3 day period, we're really drilling down into understanding what those verticals are, what the industries are. And then from there, it's simple, especially in the world of AI now, we're able to use any large language model to help us kind of fine tune that. And then obviously you need the human element, the human eyes, because sometimes the dates are off or what type of show it is. And so I think from there, we're able to drill down what that research list looks like. We typically try to be a bit more overzealous on the number of shows we present because we know that list will probably cull down easily by 40 to 50%. And so I think for you, as you're kind of building out this potential show recommendation list, I would definitely aim higher, knowing that some of those shows are probably going to be a no off the mark. Maybe Matt's been at the company 10 years. He's like, no, we did that 9 years ago. Never again will we go back, right? But then I also think that there's a level of curiosity that's peaked as well as you're introducing some of these newer shows. Matt and I talked a couple weeks back, and when I first joined years back, we had a pretty stealthy show list, but we didn't really understand why. And so I think that in doing so, we realized that, hey, we should come to the table with some recommendations as well to help them maybe think beyond just maybe what their blinders are seeing. So that's kind of how we do it. And again, this is something that we do in our annual planning. We present that out. And then, sometimes that does put us a bit behind the curve, but a lot of times our recommended shows are recommended at least 3 quarters out. So we're only kind of a quarter behind, if you will, as we're working through that. But that's a great question.
Yeah, Justin, I love the answer, but I also like what you said about we didn't understand why. Talking about going to these shows. I actually wrote a post on LinkedIn a while back, and I wrote essentially like, if I were to take over a corporate event marketing program tomorrow, here's a couple of the things I would just instinctually dive right into. One of which would be breaking down, dissecting, analyzing the shows and cutting close to 25% of them. right? Now I know that's broad, sounds difficult. A lot of you are rolling your eyes like, I can't just do that, right? But I get it. It's more the exercise, going through
Mhm.
the motion and bringing it to the table of being able
Absolutely.
to go back and say, hey, we're burning money, we're burning time. You know, these are the shows that people complain about. These are the ones that we're not gaining traction. These are the ones that we
Mhm.
go because we've always gone, that we go to support this, but maybe we could do it a different way. Maybe we can support those customers differently than just
Mhm.
showing up and dropping 50 grand to be there.
Yep.
And I would take that 20, my proposal would be to take that 25% or all those funds, cut them in half, maybe save some, but put some of the other ones into the tier one or tier
Mhm.
two shows that are really producing for us. So I
Yep.
like that you said that. We're going to go into another question that works that way, but there's two more questions. Let's get to one here from Farah. So, Farah, thank you for the question. It says, what do you recommend when execs are looking for hard ROI after 12 months when the sales cycle is really 18 to 24 months? Before you answer, Justin, what I would say, Farah, is I think my number one instinct would be that you have to get tracking the ROI with the promise to execs that once it catches up, you'll be able to deliver that. Because if you
Mhm.
don't have the ROI and they're asking for it in 12 months, you can't deliver it because it
Mhm.
doesn't exist, it may not exist. But
Yeah.
once you get into the rhythm of starting to track as time moves forward, that cycle, you know, your 18 to 24 month cycle where you get the close and you get to, you know, reap the benefits of what's going on at those events. Now you start to that data comes to life. So now every time you have to present it, that would be my thought at times because I understand that can be tricky.
Yeah, no, I tend to lean to what Matt just shared. I think for us as event marketers, sometimes unfortunately we track overall show success just by the number of leads. And I learned quickly on that a lead is just an expensive conversation until it turns into an opportunity, right? Or a closed deal. And so I think
That's a good quote.
to Matt's point, if you think about showing what ROI you can show in 12 months, maybe you walk the execs through, hey, we put this person into some sort of drip campaign and we've touched them this amount of times and we've increased their intent to purchase by X amount of percent, right? And so I think that there's some crafty and creative ways that you can kind of say, hey, I hear you. I hear you want some sort of ROI within 12 months. Here's what I can produce. But just based off of the facts that our sales cycle is more or more, around the 16, 18, 24-month time period, I'm not able to give you maybe exactly what you're looking for. And I think those conversations sometimes are respected a little more than just saying, yep, absolutely, I'll get you what you need, right? Because then we don't deliver it. And then that trust begins to be broken down, right? And so I think that being upfront, being, kind of realistic, and again, being maybe a little bit more nimble on like what you can show. And maybe we view something as success that they might not. And so basically bringing that to the table, like, hey, here's kind of what I can show you within a 12-month period. Does this reign true to you? Do you see any value in any of these pieces? And if not, let's realign on maybe how I can show you within those 12 months, maybe what that show success looks like. That's
Yes.
that's a very fair question. Very good question.
Farah, I also has me thinking essentially like, you know, I would be asking up to leadership executives, what do you want measured? What is the
Mm.
impact that we're looking for here, right? Like, what is it? Because sometimes are you dealing with new prospects? Are you dealing with customers,
Mhm.
right? Like, where in there? Because I think long sales cycles tend to really hurt the ROI conversation and the measuring and tracking for trade shows and events. But
Yep.
what you can start to do is really niche down into what is the impact that you believe you're having at the shows that lines with what executives want and start tracking some of that, at least
Mhm.
showing what I would call leading metrics versus lagging metrics. I want to show those leading ones to say, this is going well. This is what happened. It's going to produce in 18 to 24 months. And here's the leading indicators. So,
Yeah. And just
but
to piggyback off that really quickly, I think that also, so during our like pre-show planning with our core committee, that's one of the first things I ask, aside from show objectives and business goals and outcomes, what are our actual tactical ROI drivers that you, the show owner or leadership, is asking to see, right? Like we think about MQLs, SQLs, like that's like stuff that we're automatically going to get table stakes, if you will. But if you start to think about, hey, is there a certain dollar amount or a certain volume amount of maybe opportunities that we're able to put into the CRM platform to say like, all right, hey, this is showing promise. To Matt's point, that those leading metrics, I think those could also work really well. And during our pre-show meeting, like that's like the second slide. Like we like forget all the other stuff. Like
Yeah.
that's the second slide
This is what
beyond.
we're trying to do here. Yeah.
Right. And before I
Yeah.
move on, it's like a wedding. Speak now or hold your peace because this is what we're locking in,
Yeah.
right? Because I'm being held to a standard. My team is being held to a standard, and we need to make sure that everyone's aligned on that before moving forward.
Good question so far. We have a third question, and if anybody is tuned into the show, when we get questions, we answer them because I think it's a good part of doing this. So, third question from Anonymous. How do you stand out at large industry events with tons of sponsors like at Dreamforce? Yes, how do you stand out at large industry events that you must attend based on partnership, but are harder to get attention? Justin, I'll let you go first.
Yeah. That is something that we live every day in our industry. Obviously, there are, a lot of players in the space. And so it's definitely very easy, for someone to potentially be lost in the noise, if you will. I think, and I hate to answer it this way, but I truly feel like this might be a good like starter for that is truly understanding who your audience is or who you're going after. Because if you truly understand, and I think Matt talked about ICPs earlier, really understanding that audience, then you're able to understand maybe what triggers are going to kind of go off in their mind to say like, oh, I need to stop by that booth. Or, hey, I saw this in a pre-show email or a pre-show LinkedIn post or some sort of pre-show comm. Oh yeah, I need to stop by that booth because they're answering my problem with X solution, right? So I think that's the first one, and Matt mentioned it earlier. I think the creative side is absolutely a piece of it, right? Like at our core, we are still humans from a psychological standpoint. So colors, sensory, things of that nature are still going to draw us in naturally, but you also don't want to draw in traffic that you have no intent of closing with anyway, right? And so I think that the biggest piece is really understanding what that ICP looks like, who your actual audience is, and then understanding maybe how you connect with them, what their pain points are, what they're looking for. And so that way you're able to maybe more so connect on that level. And then all the other stuff is just a cherry on top, right? Like a really cool looking booth is the cherry on top, or maybe a cool happy hour where, everybody's giving out drinks, but maybe that's like something that just takes it over the edge. So that'd be probably my
Yeah, I love this question. I think that's a bit of the game, like with what me and my company do, like that's a bit of the game that we like to help our customers with. So few things, and Justin touched on it. So diving into the audience, for the one thing I always ask with our customers is as we dial into who that ICP is, don't give me the persona. I don't care about the persona, but I want what matters to them. What's relevant in their world? What do they care about right now? What's burning with them at work? What are the problems that they're trying to solve? You need to layer down into these things. It's not just saying, oh, it's typically a guy in his 50s and 60s or a woman in her whatever age. Like that to me is such baseline stuff. You have to go down deeper. Really trying to understand who they are, what is relevant to them, and what matters to them, and what kind of people are they? Like I always use this example. If you are selling into to salespeople versus selling into engineers, like they are typically just different human beings. They walk different, they talk different, they act different, they express themselves differently. Like just understanding who they are at their core, right, is really helpful. And I think, again, what matters, what's relevant to them, the relevant piece I think is very important. What's going on in their world, because I think that's how you meet, you always hear the phrase, meet them where they're at. Well, you're at the event, you're physically meeting them where they're at. What they mean is, how do you mentally meet them where they're at? Some other thoughts I have is, I do think that creative pre-show marketing really lacks, and how you're doing it matters. So I don't think you can pre-show market to every single person that you possibly want to touch point, but can you pre-show market to the top 20 people that you absolutely have to book a meeting to? You can if you want to sometimes. And if you have a general idea who's going to those shows. The last is, I think from a creative standpoint, leveraging all the things we just talked about to go into themes, ideas, and concepts, not showing up with a trade show booth that basically, if I put different graphics on it, could be somebody else's. So, leveraging themes, leveraging a concept, leveraging like an all in style experience, I think is really important to stand out. But just doing craziness to do crazy doesn't do it, which is why the audience matters so much. All right. Great. Really good questions here. All right. Let's keep.
And sorry, really
No, no, go
quickly,
ahead. Yeah.
Matt mentioned something that I mean, 100% agree with on our side is making sure that your booths or your experiences are custom to that show or that audience, right? Like
Yeah.
exactly like what Matt said. Like when you market to a salesperson versus an engineer, they care about two completely different things, right? And they even
Yeah.
probably perceive and
They
receive
process
information.
things differently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you
Right.
think about, yeah, it might be a little bit more costly to get those graphics printed directly for that show and speaks directly to that language, but you'll see that that return is much greater than the dollars that you'll spend out just to make sure that experience is customized to that exact, type of show. And so you think about the tiers, maybe your tier one shows are all super hyper customized, right? Because
Yeah.
hey, these are my traffic drivers, my true conversion drivers. And so I'm going to go a little bit larger with these budgets. And I think to Matt's point earlier, if you can find some smaller shows that you can kind of, maybe cut or reduce the presence at and then reallocate some of those funds to those larger shows, then you're kind of solving your problem without having to go back for incremental ask. I think the trade show booth isn't really even the destination. It's more of kind of that qualifier, if anything.
Yeah.
It's kind of just a part of that journey to get that lead qualified. So
It's an experience that your company is delivering, right? Like, I
yeah.
mean, it still stands that people buy from who they know, like, and trust. So
Mhm.
you were trying to make people feel a certain way. People want to feel seen and heard. They want to know underneath that you can solve their problems. They also want to like you. They want to
Yeah.
like your brand. They want to like what you stand for. So I think even like catering your engagements. If I was selling salespeople, if my client was like sales kind of profile, everything in
Mhm.
my booth would be competitive.
Mhm.
Everything. It would just be competitive games with scoreboards, and I'd have them going at it with each other, right? Versus if my ICP type was more of an engineer, I don't know. I'd probably have like stations and things they could tinker with stuff. They love to
Mhm.
get into the weeds. They love to look by themselves or maybe get helped and get some education. Like it's just different. So I think just really thinking about those people, it really mattered. We're always still humans selling to humans. And I love that element of it. All right, Justin, let's roll into. I love this idea of like before, during, and after. And,
Mhm.
we kind of wrote here in our rundown designing for results, but I don't necessarily think we're talking about designing in terms of being creative. It's kind of like what you and I have been talking about. How do you strategically design to go win? So, what are
Mhm.
some for you? Let's start before, let's just talk before a tier one trade show. Let's just be
Mhm.
specific. What are some non negotiables for you on the before show?
Yeah, I think, some of the core non-negotiables that are probably just standard throughout the industry are your pre-show emails, right? A lot of times, especially if this is a show that you've gone to for multiple years, you've probably developed a pretty good list in your CRM, right? And so being able to make sure that list is segmented out and that they're receiving some sort of drip email campaign leading up to the show. I think in addition to that is like some sort of social asset, right? Whether that be LinkedIn, Instagram, X, what have you, whatever platform you guys play within, is making sure that they're also seeing some sort of drip throughout your social. Another thing I think that is probably one that is underestimated is direct sales outreach. Like throwing it
Absolutely.
into the conversation, right? Like
Yeah.
you would be surprised how many times sales folks, and no knock at all, but they solely rely on marketing to get the word out versus utilizing their portfolio, their platform, anybody that they have in their network or database. And so I think that if you think about pre-show, those are kind of the non-negotiables. Those are kind of the ones that we stand up regardless of the tier to ensure that we're doing our part to drive that traffic. If you start to get a little bit more creative, obviously looping in some sort of demand gen campaigns, right? Like as you're building out this strategy we have a pretty large tier one show in March. So we started, I believe, the latter part of the summer and started kind of dripping some educational pieces, rolled out a couple of webinars around kind of this specific topic to ensure that they began to position us as kind of thought leaders within the space. And so as they start to then see brand awareness pieces or, hey, GP is going to be at that show, they're connecting the dots like, oh, actually they did a webinar on this and helped me learn about X, right? And then, oh, they use that slogan. Oh, and now I'm seeing this on LinkedIn, or oh, now I'm seeing a video about this, right? And so I think that if you're setting it up to not just be a one and done, and it's just a part really of a full timeline of touch points, you're able to be a lot more successful, I think, in your pre-show.
I like that. You know what is, as you were talking, I was thinking about, pre-show. One thing that I think is really valuable on pre-show is coming up with a hook, coming up with an offer. It's like leveraging an engagement and offer a hook. You got to have something that people want. And then I
Yep.
think to tie it into what Justin said, I'm a believer, like most of these sales teams, they're working from ABM lists. They have
Mhm.
customer base, they have targets, they have like, they should be aggressively reaching out and seeing, will they be at this show? Hey, we have this offering for you.
Mhm.
Just trying to get a meeting is hard sometimes, but if you have this really cool offer, or you have an engagement for them to go through, or you have rather than doing tchotchkes, you're giving away high value giveaways that
Mhm.
somebody might want, or you're throwing a party and you can offer them a VIP ticket. You got to have something, right? Like you kind of got to be the cool kid in high school that's got the rich parents that has the cool house. Like you got to,
100%.
yeah, you got to create it. You got to create a hook to a degree. And then the other thing is just always delivering value, right? I mean, these people need value. They're not there just to be friendly with you, right?
Right.
Obviously.
And I think another point to that, Matt, that you bring up that's really important, I think, and it kind of goes back to maybe the standing out piece. But if you think about it, everyone that's going there for like business in a sense is getting offered free drinks, free dinner, like a free notebook and pen, right? And so I think to Matt's point earlier about really creating a customized experience that not only creates value for them, but also entices them to want to come by. Obviously, your current customers will probably feel more obligated to stop by rather, whether they have like some cool offering or not. But I think those people that you're prospecting, that you're trying to draw into the booth, is where you have to get really creative and think about, hey, what do these people care about? What could be
Yep.
a cool experience? Are you going
There you go. Yeah.
to a cool place? And maybe it's this, I know the sphere is kind of getting older now, but like when it first launched, like taking someone to the sphere because they're in Vegas. So thinking about, again, those hyper customized opportunities, whether that be for the industry, for that person, or for the demographic or location that you're at, really helps drive that excitement. Because I mean, again, everyone is getting the same kind of comms. You just have to figure out what's going to make you the differentiator against your competitors.
Yeah. Let's talk specifically on the show floor, right? So for you during the show, what kind of like touch points, qualifying, like let's just hit on some of that. What's really important to you on the show floor at a trade show? What are some of the strings that you're pulling to have a
Yeah, I
successful
think
show?
one of the biggest ones, and it takes me back to like being in high school and being in, working in like customer service, is really
Mhm.
thinking about what that experience is when someone's walking up to your booth, right? Like, do you have witty, smiling people at your booth
Yeah.
offering this welcoming experience? I was at a show last week or a week before last in Anaheim, and one of our sales guys was just doing a phenomenal job in just being organically nice, right? Like you get people that are like, as you're coming down the aisle, they're staring at you, they're staring a hole into your head, and it makes you
Yeah.
not even want to stop, right?
It's
But
odd. Yeah.
but you have that kind of welcoming environment, welcoming spirit, I think is really important. So I think making sure that you're staffing your booth with number one, the right amount of people to cover that, right? So if let's say you're an island and you have aisles coming from each way, you should have someone in most of those areas that are welcoming people into the booth. I think that's probably one of the biggest and probably one of the simplest ones, right?
Mm.
I think also is having an experience or having some sort of defined journey throughout your booth. From what I've seen and going into booths and experiencing it from the user perspective, is that it seems a bit confusing or clunky. Like, hey, I don't know. Am I supposed to go here? Am I supposed to talk to this person? Am I grabbing this? Like, what am I doing? And so, really having to define strategy on maybe where you would want them to enter, what kind of portions you want them to stay longer at, where you want them to hang out, what you want them to do, I think is another piece. And then also having all of your booth workers equipped with some sort of knowledge. I think I've seen it, several times where I've walked into a booth and the person's like, sorry, that's not my lane. Let me find someone else instantly. I'm like, you've lost me, right? And so I think that while it might take some time on the front end to make sure everyone's trained up and can kind of speak to the overall messaging points, that is a differentiator, because I'm sure all of us have walked into booths before and not maybe had a conversation with the most educated person on what they were talking about selling or offering. And so
Yeah.
making sure that all of your people are equipped and knowledgeable, I think is another kind of driver there.
Justin, I always love asking the question to a client of ours if we're designing a space or doing like whatever, we're in the consultative phase or we're working on something with them. I love saying, hey, I'm your ideal customer. I'm that perfect customer that you're looking to work with, that you want to meet at this trade show, get in front of, whether we know each other or we've never met, doesn't matter. I'm ideal. When I come up to your booth, whether for a booked meeting, by accident, by happenstance, what happens next? Jessica, I don't know. She went,
Yep.
day out, and people are like, man, you lost me, and
All
you don't have
right.
an experience for me, and not everybody's up on the same beat of what we're trying to do here.
And then
You
you have
have to
that,
be in step.
you got that one person coming from behind you. Hey, can I scan your badge? And it's like, it just, yeah,
Yeah.
it,
And
it does
sometimes one person
work.
can make or break your show.
1000%.
Sometimes, I mean, when you're talking ROI and you're talking all those things, sometimes I try to focus people on, let's stop worrying about the masses.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about the 20,
1000%.
30 people that if you got to have a conversation with them or deliver them an experience, how you would deliver it, what the conversation needs to look like, because that's your moment while you're together. And
Yep.
I think what you're saying about booth personnel, about taking them through an experience, where do we go with them, who greets them, all that stuff really matters. It's
Yeah.
those details, man.
1000%. And one thing that I learned years and years ago is that I was always chasing exactly what you just said. Oh, I got to get 150 scans.
Yeah.
But out of that 150, two were qualified, right? And so it's like really
A lot of
thinking
busy work.
about
Yeah.
exactly. And then right. And then on the back end, you're having to sift through that. You're having to explain why, hey, I had this great lead scan count, but only two of them converted, right? And so I think that to your point, that quality over quantity, which obviously is a term that's been around forever, but really diving into, hey, making sure that maybe I'm doing less shows, but I'm really doing with a lot more
Yeah.
intention versus doing
Yep.
a lot of shows with a lot more hope, right? And so I think that's a big piece.
I love that. Let's talk after, right? So for you, what are some of the non-negotiables for post show? I mean, what are some of the things that your team's doing, that you're pushing, that you're watching and tracking down the line?
Yeah. So I think post show arguably is the most important out of the
I would
entire
agree.
show. To me, the pre, during, and post, your post is probably going to be the most important. And it's really defined by that first 72 hours. We have, obviously, even when we're creating our pre show assets and deliverables, post show is right alongside, right? There's nothing worse than scrambling the day before the end of a show to say like, oh crap, we got to get our social together. Do we have email copy? Like, did we do this? Are they put into the right segment?
Yeah.
And so I think that, obviously post show email is really big, but what you want to do to really stand out after a post show, because imagine 90% of the people that have been scanned through all the booths at your show have received some sort of email. Hey, it was nice to chat with you. And you don't even remember what the conversation was about. I think it's really standing out and understanding. And I think it goes back to Matt's point and kind of some of the things that you guys offer is more so understanding post show, how are we continuing that experience, right? Like a lot of people are thinking, hey, this 3 day show is really what's going to get me to close this opportunity. In reality, that's not. That's more so the test on if your pre show has been strong enough for them to kind of make a connection there, right? And so I think that you think about post show, your post show emails, but really whatever that experience was, right? Whether that was like a drop card in the mail, whether that was some sort of LinkedIn campaign or demand gen campaign, like really thinking about how you continue to add value to that person, right? Like they don't want to know, hey, thank you so much for stopping by the booth. Now, will you buy 500, pieces of my item? It's like, no, like how do you continue to drive
Yeah.
home the value piece? How can I get you connected with a webinar that might be more pertinent to maybe what you're doing? How can I get you connected to like a newsletter that we have reoccurring? How can I get you connected? Hey, we'll be in your city in 6 months from now. Would love to reconnect to understand, and so it's really understanding how you connect with them on that customized level to really drive home. I'd say the value piece of it. So that's
What I
really what we
like.
focus post show. And another thing that we do, sorry to cut you off, but
No, no,
is
go ahead, go ahead.
staying connected with the sales team. So probably 6, 7, 8 months after, we're still connecting with them on some sort of cadence to understand, hey, Matt, did you push that one forward? Oh, no, it fell through. Okay, good. Thanks for sharing that update. Can we hear why? Right. And so that
Mhm.
way we're able to continue iterating against that to understand, hey, we probably need to do this different next time. We also send internal and external surveys. So I think those also help from a booth experience, what the booth looks like, what it feels like, what it sounds like, what it smells like. Like we also want to learn all of that information to again continue to iterate and make the next experience even better.
I think it kind of comes back to what we discussed earlier about like customer journey. Do
Mhm.
you like
Yep.
if you are at these trade shows and you're just viewing everybody as a singular lead, it's not really how it works. You have to understand their story, where they're at. Do they know you? Do they not know you? Have they ever heard of your company? Have they ever bought from your company? Have they ever, like, where are they at? And then that goes back to when you hear people talking about personalization.
Mhm.
Personalization is like using a lead retrieval system so that you can get the notes in there from the conversation that you had, so that when you go to follow up a day or two later, you can follow up the right way.
Yep.
And you're not just like, hey, let's get a schedule on the call so you could buy something from it. They're like, no, no way.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
how do you move them along? Because sometimes people view a trade show as like this like end all be all, like you have to accomplish it right then and there and close a
Mhm.
deal. It's not how they all work.
Yep.
I've had shows where we have customers that sign contracts and close on the show floor, and it's awesome. It's
Mhm.
amazing. It is a very easy indicator to utilize. That's not most cases.
Right.
So follow up, like you're saying, the level of detail matters so you can go follow up the right way. And I have found the bigger the company, the more complex it gets when you follow up, without a doubt.
Yes,
So
exactly. And Matt
yeah,
touched on something really important there is always opt in for the extra charge of the custom qualifiers for a lead retrieval tool. Like
yeah,
I would
yeah.
never understand why someone just does the lead retrieval as is and is like, all right, we'll fix it on the back end. Like have that custom qualifier built in, whether you're using the qualifiers to put the drop down of the people that are in there so you can easily tag them to it, or to Matt's point, you're putting notes in there or you're putting them in particular segments or groups, because that really helps on the back end. And I'm sure, your CRM person or your data insights person is going to love you for that because you're making their job so much easier when they're importing
Yep.
those leads in. And there's no confusion. Like, nope, that's Matt's. They talked about, X, Y, and Z, and let's do it in there. And I think, oftentimes customization is mistaken for, hey, Matt Kleinrock. And then it's
Like a template in an email.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, I know
It's
you.
not what we're talking about. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I definitely think that that's a big piece you have to be cognizant of.
All right, man. We are flying through here. I wanna close. I want to talk about something that you and I talked about that kind of resonated with you is this idea of, do less and win more,
Mhm.
portfolio, budget, metrics. Talk to me a little bit about that, do less, win more, because that seemed to resonate with you.
Yeah, I think it goes back to my initial kind of uncovering, call it 40 something shows in a year and really not understanding why. Right. And so I
Mm.
think really going in and breaking down and trying to figure out, hey, is show X really delivering the value that we're saying it's delivering on paper, or is show Y, do we have a smaller forecast for the show, but it's really delivering a lot more than we anticipated? And so I think as you begin to think about it, like it's okay to decrease. Like I think there's probably a misconception, like the less amount of shows that I go with, maybe the less that I'm doing. And that's not the case in any means. Really, if you are able to really, let's say, dial in on X amount of shows and put 110% into it, you're probably able to yield better results from that. And so I think that when you think about a stacked calendar, like, yeah, it maybe looks nice on your calendar. And like, oh, that guy Justin is busy, man. But it's like, what is he truly getting out of that? Versus saying like, hey, I'm going to be a strategic thought partner. I'm going to be a true P&L owner, and say, I'm not going to go to this show just because of the past 10 years we've gone to this show. And I know that that raises some concern. And I think the way that we've been able to navigate it is truly understanding do we need to be at that show? Or to Matt's point earlier, are we able to offer something else to
Yeah,
our particular customer segment that would be at that show that would then offset that, right? Because sometimes you're thinking, oh, if I'm not there, then X, Y, and Z competitor is going to steal my customer. And in reality, that's probably not the case, right? And so I think that you have to be cognizant of the shows that you're going to really reevaluate. Now is a perfect time to say, hey, what does my 26 calendar look like? Are there any shows on that I'm like, you know what? We probably don't need to be at that. And 9 times out of 10, you'll be surprised. You take that to your planning team and everyone's thinking the same. Like, you know what? I was thinking the exact same thing. Why are we still going to this show? And so I think that, that really
yeah,
helps understand how you're showing up in the spaces. And just because you're there doesn't mean it's a good look, right? And so I think
agreed.
really being intentional about those shows you're showing up to and giving it your all.
Yeah. I think you've used the word intentional a couple times now, and I think that's really important. A lot of the stuff that we are talking about, we have dove into, is how to be intentional, right? In how
Mhm.
you think about the customer and how you approach everything. Let's close with a question. We got one question left.
Yeah.
Let's use the last couple of minutes here. It says, how are you tying off the floor events to on the floor experience? I do know this is just becoming more popular at events. There's even people that are not sponsors and not exhibitors that are throwing off floor events
Mhm.
and at the show events, and sort of, you call it like a little bit guerrilla marketing. But as an exhibitor, for you, are you doing stuff off the floor and tying it to on the floor? What are you doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of times it really depends on what the show is. If it's a tier one show, more than likely we are going to do an off the floor event. And as I mentioned, we're going to typically tie that to some sort of experience that's relative to the location. Again, I mentioned the Sphere, and I think I saw someone say that they hosted a suite in the Sphere. So I love to hear that.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest ways that we're tying it back. I think also, if you think about a customer event or an offsite VIP, whatever, a lot of times maybe it's just a welcome sign, right? But think about how you're taking whatever you're talking about in your booth, whatever you're offering in your booth, any of the graphics, and bringing that into your customer experience. I think is really important, right? So if you're doing, let's call it a scavenger hunt in your booth, bring some of those elements to the actual customer event so they can see the continuity across your brand activations and really be able to tie those together. I think that I might get some pushback for saying this, but I think gone are the days are saying like, hey, we'll go to a hotel ballroom and have beer and wine and some less than stellar food being passed around, and
Right.
we're going to call it an amazing VIP event. I think
Yeah.
now are
I
the
agree.
times where people are craving experiences, and you'll honestly be surprised. Like we crunched some numbers the other day for like a comparison on a customer event and some suite at a entertain or at a basketball game, and it was actually less expensive to do the basketball game, which
Cool.
obviously lended itself to a much more immersive experience. And so I
I
think
love
that
that.
as you think about those customer events, don't be afraid to get creative. Don't be afraid to kind of push the envelope to say, hey, I know we've done this hotel ballroom event for 20 years, but how do we really elevate it? Because you want your customers and prospects to leave saying, wow, I hope I get invited next year. Or wow, I
Yeah.
have to call Justin next week because like this has just been a great experience, right? And so I think as you're thinking about that, it's really important to be creative and think about, put yourself in their shoes. What would you enjoy?
Yep.
Enjoy going to, and not to say the hotel ballroom thing is just flat out bad, but I think that there's some more creative things that you're able to offer that might be a little bit longer lasting with your
Justin,
customer.
in step with that, I like more of a VIP custom smaller style thing, putting more intention and thought and being more thoughtful about, per se, who's invited and
Mhm.
making it more VIP-ish, right? And using
Yep.
those funds and your time off the floor to deliver something valuable to everybody. I think that, for Anonymous who's asking here, that I was talking earlier about the hook and the offer. That's
Mhm.
another hook and offer. These are the things I'm talking about, is like, how are you shaping this experience? Justin, my friend, we are on time. You were fantastic, man. This was good conversation. Great in the Q&A with everybody. Thank you so much for asking some really great questions to help drive this conversation. Justin, let everybody know, where can they find you? Are you LinkedIn, Instagram,
Yep.
Facebook guy? Where can they find you?
Yeah, I was just telling Ish earlier. So I think she dropped our LinkedIn's in the chat. Feel free to ping me on there. I am embarrassingly not up to speed on my LinkedIn profile, but maybe I'll do that over the holidays.
All right,
But
man.
would love to connect on there. If you're ever in Atlanta, obviously that's where I'm located, and would love to grab coffee if you're interested in chatting more. But Matt and Cody and Ish, really appreciate the opportunity. It's been
Yeah.
a pleasure working with you guys over the past couple weeks and months here, and excited to see what you guys continue doing in the space.
Good stuff, man. This was fun. Thanks for showing up. Try to give you the best hour we can give you. Justin, again, thank you, man. I appreciate it. And we'll see everybody soon.